A very warm welcome back, everyone. We are now going to have a sharing session by Credit Suisse, and we next have Mr. Mark Hansel, Director of Global Trading Solutions from Credit Suisse, and Ms. Sun Minja, or MJ, from Credit Suisse, who will share with us more about the bank and the exciting opportunities in technology within the bank. So during the session, please feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A window, and we'll address these live during the session. I'll now hand the time over to Mark and Minja.
Thank you, Florence. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us. It's a privilege to be able to speak to you. So I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to Credit Suisse, to myself, to some of the roles that we have, and give you a sort of insight into what we do as technologists within Credit Suisse. So Credit Suisse is it's a global investment bank. It's about 150 years old. It's headquartered in Switzerland. We have offices across the United States, across Europe, Asia, particularly Singapore and Hong Kong. We also have a big presence in India, Australia, Japan. And in terms of the sort of services that we provide, banking obviously spans a spectrum of services from the institutional, servicing hedge funds and sort of big investment banks, all the way through to sort of the private wealth and sort of individual investor. And so particularly here in Singapore, we focus on the sort of private banking side of that spectrum. And so one of the trends that we've seen since the global financial crisis has been banks have tended to scale down the sort of trading, proprietary trading, and the sort of investment banking side, particularly sort of banks, European banks like Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, and so on, to focus on sort of more reliable revenues, right? So private banking, private wealth management it tends to be a sort of repeatable sort of revenue stream, whereas the sort of trading and sort of risky investment banking institutional work tends to be a bit more, it tends to fluctuate more. And so particularly here in Asia, we have, there's obviously a growing sort of middle class. There's a sort of expansion in China. There's a lot of new sort of millionaires and billionaires even who are looking for sort of wealth management capabilities, and they're quite a demanding sort of client set. And over the sort of last 10 or 15 years, the sort of technology to support that hasn't really kept pace in the same way that it has kept pace in, you know, maybe sort of some of the more sort of advanced markets like the United States. And so one of the big things that we're doing here is to try and bring new sort of digitized solutions to an underinvested in marketplace. And so a lot of that comprises sort of extra new products, access to sort of the things, the sort of attractive opportunities like IPOs, private equity, structured products, sort of equity derivatives, highly personalized sort of financial products for people who run businesses and also want to manage their sort of exposure in terms of their net wealth vis-a-vis their business. And so maybe I'll talk to you a little bit about my team, my area. So I work in a division called Global Trading Solutions, and we provide trading capability to the wealth management businesses globally. So there's obviously a big wealth management business in Switzerland, in Europe, particularly here in Asia, and then globally across, you know, sort of other parts of the globe. And so my team specifically focuses on what are called listed securities. So stocks and shares in the simplest case, you know, sort of Apple stocks, Facebook, whatever. Fixed income, so bonds and bond-like products. Funds, so everything from hedge funds, private equity, mutual funds, through to equity options, so equity derivatives. And then there are sort of other sister teams that focus on things like structured products and more complex derivatives that are served over the counter, so they're not traded on exchanges. We have teams that look at FX, and various other sort of products in the spectrum. And so one of the things that my team specifically is engaged in is trying to build a trading platform that can be run globally, and it can support what we call omni-channel order flow. And so if you think about where orders might get placed or may originate from, they may come from actual clients who are sitting at home trading on their accounts. They may come from what we call family offices, so people who act on behalf of Credit Suisse clients, manage their investments for them. It may come from sort of institutional wealth managers, sort of bigger players in the market space. And each of these different user sets has different requirements in terms of how they want to connect with us. Some people might want to use a user interface. Some people might want to do it programmatically via an API. Some people might want to use what we call FIX. FIX is a financial interchange protocol. It's essentially a sort of key value pair, but it's very fast and it's highly embedded in the financial infrastructure globally. So as a bank who wants to provide capability to people, we need to be able to support a range of a sort of menu of options for how clients can connect to us. But of course, under the hood, what we want to do is we don't want to build a separate trading system for each one of these channels. We want to build one trading system that can handle order flow regardless of where it comes from and how we report back to the clients. And so this is a sort of a pretty big exercise, and to do it globally as well, it's a complicated piece, and not only is it complicated technically, but we have, if you think about the way markets work, the sort of Australian and New Zealand markets open at about 5 a.m. Singapore time, and the American markets close just slightly before that. So it's pretty much a 24/5. We know that clients want to place orders during the weekend as well, so it's pretty much 24/7. It's 24/7 sort of business. And so the other aspects to this that I think are interesting technically is that we trade something like, I think I can't remember the exact number currently up to date, but it's in the order of sort of 200 billion notional a year, which is a significant amount. And so it's very important that we are precise. Small bugs can cause serious material impact to clients and customers. So we take the quality of our systems very, very seriously, right? And so, one of the things that we do, one of the reasons why we, one of the techniques that we use to sort of support this kind of reliability and precision is to automate not just testing, but also automate releases and automate as much as possible. And as you automate, you remove the scope for manual error, for human intervention. So this allows us to be fast and precise. We're not quite at the sort of Google level where they release hundreds of times a day, but we do release regularly, like multiple times a week, right? Which is pretty good for a bank. I mean, there's a lot of ideas about what it's like to work in a bank, particularly in technology. And one of those ideas is that people only release every 3 months, 6 months, but we need to be much faster than that. So in terms of the roles in my team, we obviously support a range of capabilities, front-end user interfaces that are predominantly web-based. So we use React.js and JavaScript to back-end, and on the back-end we're pure Kotlin now. So we do have some older code that's written in Java, but basically we're now Kotlin, Spring Boot, OpenShift, Docker. In terms of data, it's sort of polyglot, so it's Kafka, Mongo, Oracle, Elasticsearch. Really, it's about choosing the right tool for the job. And my team is, in terms of size, is about 30-something people. We're predominantly based in Singapore, but we also have people in Hong Kong and Zurich. We consider ourselves agile, but sort of the way I would describe it is post-agile, in the sense that We don't follow Scrum. We've been doing Agile for 10 years, maybe more now. So we're in a place where we can adapt and choose the parts of Agile that we think work for us. And it's very much about pushing decision making down to the lowest level possible. So, because teams make the best decisions for the problems that they're facing, and so within my area, I mean, I have maybe 5 or 6 teams reporting to me, and each team runs a slightly different agile process, right? So we don't force anything down from top down. It's all about teams choosing how they want to operate, making their own decisions. So being agile, stripping out bureaucracy, giving people technical autonomy, so sort of freedom and responsibility. So on the one hand, we give developers freedom to make decisions, but we also expect them to exercise that freedom with a care and duty to the customers and systems, and demonstrate responsibility. So what else? We have a sort of set of modern sort of practices. I mean, it's a bit of a struggle with COVID. We're a very friendly team, very collaborative, very open. We tend to work in pairs. Particularly pre-COVID, we do a lot of pair programming. So sort of pair, if you aren't familiar, pair programming is where 2 developers will try and solve a problem together. And generally the idea is that, maybe 2 heads are better than 1, but also you validate the design and the approach with somebody as you go through that process, right? And so, you can challenge each other. It's also a way for more experienced developers to impart sort of knowledge and experience and learning to sort of maybe a more junior developer through that process. And so that's really one of the kind of key things that I think I would say about CS as an employer, particularly in sort of Asia and Singapore, Hong Kong, is that we value mentorship very, very highly. So particularly for junior developers, and we take in probably sort of 15 graduates every year across the region, and maybe another 15 in terms of internships. So we have a pretty big commitment to sort of developing junior talent. One of the things that we think is important and is a sort of key determinant of success is exposure and access to good senior mentors. So it can be very tempting as a junior engineer to focus on particular pieces of technology. Am I getting exposure to whatever AWS or whatever it is, right? But actually, the really important thing for junior engineers in terms of progressing their career is to work with more experienced people who can teach them, help them short circuit, the kind of mistakes that people make, and explain, the decision making, the design process that we go through. And so that's a kind of key thing I think about Credit Suisse. It's something we take very seriously. As one of the sort of the pillars that underpins our graduate program. But we would, of course, we do that with any new joiner in the team, right? We want to integrate people well. We want to make sure that they feel part of the team and understand, where their contribution is making a difference and, what's expected. I think the other thing I would say about CS in terms of the sort of sales pitch, the things I love about working here is it's a very family friendly sort of work-life balance oriented culture, right? It's not a sort of 996. We don't believe in burning people out. We want to be able to operate sustainably indefinitely. And so that means finding a pace that people can are comfortable with in the long run, right? It doesn't mean working evenings and weekends and burning ourselves out and have people quit because they're unhappy. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that we have a very supportive and sort of technically oriented senior management culture. So, the sort of hierarchy above me, certainly my boss was a developer himself. And we have people who really understand why we do things like automated testing. We never get put under pressure to cut corners on things like automation, right? We never have anybody come to us and say, just don't write any tests, right? It's culturally, I mean, it would go very much against the grain of what we're about if anybody were to do that. So senior management is a genuinely fantastic, really, really good. I think just one other thing I would say that's different, at least compared to other banks, is that we have quite a stable process for deciding what we work on every year. So we have a process that runs sort of September, October, November, where we sort of map out what we're going to work on for the following year. We do sort of initial feasibility studies, we scope it, we broadly work out how many people we think we might want to put on that particular problem. And then we agree the sort of budget, the funding with the business. And come January, if that budget has been agreed, then those projects go ahead. And for the most part, we are left to get on with it for that year. And, you know, one of the things that I've found frustrating working in other banks is that there isn't that kind of control or stability. And so you can find yourself being context switched, you know, every couple of weeks or couple of months as, you know, sort of business priorities change, or, you know, people get new ideas. So there isn't that rigor in terms of the control of the work pipeline. So CS is very nice in that respect. What else is there to say? I think that's probably it. I'd like MJ to join us. MJ works in a slightly different area of the APAC technology team. She's a very well-respected and fantastic developer in her own right. So MJ,
all right, thanks, Mark. Thank you. So Mark has brought a big picture view of Credit Suisse and his team from a manager perspective, from a management perspective. From me, I will bring a different perspective because I'm considerably still junior in the department. So I joined Credit Suisse through the graduate program that Mark was mentioning about. I joined as an intern in 2015 and then came back through the graduate program as a full-time hire in 2016. A bit of introduction of myself before I start everything else. I started in global market in my first year. I would love to share more about that team, that role with people who are still interested, but my information about that team is a little bit stale. I would rather not share the things that might not apply anymore. I will probably elaborate more on the private banking side, which is the department I've been working for the past 4 years. The team I'm working in is APAC Private Banking Client Onboarding and Lifecycle. It's a little bit long and mouthful. A bit introduction of what this department is actually about. My department falls in the big umbrella of APAC Private Banking. So basically we have, different ways of slicing the cake. One way that people are find it easier to get a hand with is the private banking side of the business have transaction side and the, support side. So transaction side is basically how clients will make their trade with us, establish the relationship with us, and the maintenance or the support side, which is basically the side I'm working on, is safeguarding the validity and safety of all this client data. So on the transaction base, you have things like platforms for users to place their trades. So historically, a lot of things are manual or through human intervention. It could be institution clients, or it could be an individual wealthy clients who are working with us trying to place trade. They normally do it through a relationship manager or assistant relationship manager, so ARMs and RMs. But increasingly, when the solutions become more digitalized and a lot more clients are becoming more familiar with technology, they would rather be their own master in this sense. So there are less and less human interaction when it comes to that. With regard to that, we have platforms like digital private banking, which allows users to log in and place their own trades, or even digitalized solutions for regulatory requirements, such as investment profile questionnaire, where users will have to log into the website every 2 years to update, now I'm trying to be more risky, I want to invest more money, I'm okay to take more risk these couple of years because I've been earning a lot of money. All things are becoming digitalized in the past couple of years. So that's the transaction part. I'm not too sure about it. I would rather be sweet and short and simple than being wrong. The part I'm more familiar with is the client onboarding lifecycle side, so which is basically about maintenance of client data. Speaking of client data, is more or less like an escalated version of private banking, which I believe everyone has certain exposure to. So very much like how you open an account with OCBC, save your money over there, and use the money over there to do some investment through OCBC. So very much like that. In our side of client onboarding life cycle, we do have processes supporting onboarding of clients, which could be institutional, it could be individual. And once they are onboarded with us, we are supporting the processes of maintaining their data. So for example, if today Mark is becoming our individual investor, I am his RM or ARM. Let's say if Mark has changed his residential address from Tulloch Eye to Harbourfront, he will have to let me know that this is the change he's proposing. And from my side, I'll be able to log into the system that we're trying to write, say that, okay, so this is Mark's new address. Is there anything else, a document support required from that perspective to validate the change? Or is there anyone I need to bring in for validation before this becomes facts on our database? So this is a very example of what we deal with. If we want to look at it from a technical perspective, like what kind of works will you be involved in? Our department majorly have two different ways of splitting teams. One is the functional squad. Those squad all work on web applications. So these applications will have a web facing RM, relationship managers, assistant relationship managers, some facing client directly. And the other side of the thing is the core foundational team, which is basically more about backend, about saving data, about validation of data. So I personally work in two different perspectives in this department. I started with the workflow management side. So from that, I realized that it's a little bit, it's pretty fun in the sense that requirements and domains knowledge in PB is pretty easy to visualize. You can normally find a connection between how you interact with UOB or OCBC or DBS. But then when I move on to the core foundation team, it's pretty fun as well. It's a little bit difficult to to visualize because these are the things we deal with, like data storage. So it's not like web interfaces. So you have to imagine that, okay, so there are 18 workflows using our engine. What are the things that we actually need to consider? But those are, well, to be honest, to me, the fun part is actually technology. In terms of technology, the functional for the web applications, for those who are having a front-end flavor of it, our team uses React.js, JavaScript. We are moving towards TypeScript. We are hoping that we can have more TypeScript projects moving on. Not everything is in TypeScript yet. There are one or two components which are still in Angular, which are in the process of migrating into React. And in terms of backend, we have Java, some flavor of Kotlin. We are still in the process of moving into Kotlin. So 80% of the projects are Java. We use Spring Boot, we use Micronaut. In terms of like database, we have MongoDB, Elasticsearch, or Kafka for messaging services. I believe from our side, what we're trying to do is, I do see a pattern ever since I joined private banking. I joined in 2017 when private banking is still not famous for being very innovative in technology or embracing in new technologies. I have to say that I'm not going to lie saying that our history has been perfect and we want to embrace IT from day one. That wasn't a story for us. We started with a lot of processes still being manual and long. One thing that I find it really difficult to believe is for a client to onboard with Credit Suisse, the process when it was a lot more manual and long before we start revamping the entire landscape. The process for one person to become a client after they know our relationship manager can range from 6 months to even 2 years. And most of the stuff are paper-based. So let's say if the client, after 1 year, he changed his job, you have to go into a document room saying that, okay, I need to find out this folder about this client and say that before he get onboarded to our bank, he has already changed another job once again. So everything is very paper-based. You can imagine how long it will be and how troublesome things can be. After I joined, I actually joined the right time when things are moving to a different direction. Our management have a strategy of digitalizing everything that we can. So now we do have more workflows very digitalized, especially for things that can be automated. We don't even need human intervention in terms of like system-driven stuff. So let's say if the client, every 2 years, the client needs to update their information about their legal ID, we need to validate if this still applies. All these things can be generated automatically instead of a RM going to a calendar to say, okay, so this is my client. He updated in 2019. Now I probably need to reach out to him again. There's a lot of things to worry about when in the old days, things are purely manual or not automated. Well, that's a bit about the processes. I guess we have very limited time, so I'll probably just be short and succinct. So in terms of like development processes, obviously we're still moving towards better technologies. We're moving towards OpenShift for deployment. In terms of CI, we're now using GitLab. Very much like Mark has been saying, we are agile team. We have been agile for a while. So different teams do have, we try to make sure that teams are self-managed. So they can take their decision on how you want to carry out agile. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, depending on how you feel is more appropriate. And also in terms of the ceremonies, we do exercise more flexible choices. So that, for example, for my team, we don't have dedicated time towards ceremonies such as spring planning, but whenever we have a new stuff, when we feel that we want to talk about it, we just bring everyone on board and talk in the daily stand-up or whatsoever. So we don't have dedicated times for spring planning or backlog grooming or retrospectives, but we do bring everyone in case there's a need. Yeah, well, a little bit touch on the interview processes and all. I have been involved in interview processes for the past 2 years. Obviously, we do have different criteria for teams, for people coming in with different background. But a very important thing that we do look for from people is your passion in technology. Obviously, we want to be more innovative. We're not known as the most innovative, and we would like to become one of those. So if you are interested in new technologies, if you're interested in working out and improving on existing solutions, yes, that's the thing we're looking for. Technical capability, definitely there will be certain sort of like threshold, but we do have different expectations for people from different backgrounds. So let's say if there's a junior or graduate hire, we probably don't look at the robust of the solution during the interview itself, but we would like to look for passion in technology, attitude, ability to work with others or communicate effectively. But in terms of experience hire, definitely we would like to you to have the right kind of exposure before and be able to lead the team with your experience. I guess I'm leaving very little time to Q&A, so I'll probably just cut myself short. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mark and
Awesome. Yeah.
Minjay. Maybe I can invite Steve to come on to moderate some of the questions. Thank
Hi,
you.
yeah, thanks. I see some of the questions that have been posted on the Q&A. I think the first one is, are you open to take in diploma holders? I'm not sure for the one you're asking if it's a kind of entry level kind of opportunity. We do have our internship and graduate program opportunities which are open on a yearly basis. So do apply. We do not restrict in terms of which school you come from and whatever not, right? If your profile fits, we will invite you for our selection process, which is very much software engineering focused. Second question.
Yeah, I'd just add to that. I mean, in terms of experience hiring, we don't screen on degrees or qualifications, right? We have a technical interview process where we pair program with people, and that's really the key interview. There are a couple of other interviews that we do as well, but for people who maybe don't have the sort of academic background, it doesn't matter. It's not a bar, right? You in terms of sort of gaining access to places like Credit Suisse, it's much more important to say, I mean, a good GitHub profile is much more preferable from my point of view, right? If I can see that someone's active, I can see that they write tests with their code, I can see the way they think about their design, right? That's counts a lot more than sort of a degree certificate.
Cool. I think there's another question that is quite related to that. Is there any program for mid-career switch in Credit Suisse? I think Mark and MJ, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, but yeah, that's what Mark said. That's what we look for, the qualities that he just mentioned, regardless, you know, where you come from.
Yeah, we're really focused on, as MJ said, the sort of technical passion and sort of ability to learn quickly, to pick things up, and I guess you know, testing is a big part of our sort of interview process. So if you understand automated testing and automation in general, then that's, you know, that's going to be something that would get you a long way with the interviewers.
Yep. There's another question which is, I think, along the same line as well, about whether someone with STEM education background is required. So I think that's already answered. MJ, there's a question for you.
Okay.
Hi, MJ. Thank you for sharing your experience in the private banking department. I would like to know what are the jobs currently available in the private banking at Credit Suisse. Furthermore, do we need to have the CACS exam before applying for a job? I'm not sure if this question actually relates to more of a actual private banking role, rather than maybe you might want to explain your actual role in Credit Suisse.
Yeah, actually, well, what I can speak for is the IT recruitment for the PB side. So if it is not an IT side, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. Well, I'm certainly not the best person to answer that question. In terms of our hiring for IT department, actually, you'll be interested to find out that on website, our job title is called Senior Software Developer. So you can see that we don't really, well, it's not about what kind of certification you have, what kind of exposure you have. Everyone will come in as a software developer. Obviously, we do also look for business engineers or business analysts or PO kind of role as well, but I have to say that's we do have lesser appetite for those roles as compared to the fewer full stack developer roles. We don't really cut on, well, what was your major or what was your certification. No, I have to be honest, I'm really bad on certifications. I don't have any certification. The only certification I can provide is probably my graduation cert, which is not going to be really helpful. The thing is not about what kind of exams you have been taken. I know people, there are definitely a few popular choices like the Mongo developers or Elasticsearch developers or Scrum developer or even Azure, AWS. Those can be helpful, but those are not necessarily the thing that we cut people on. Let's say if you don't have a certification, but do have valuable exposures on using MongoDB, that doesn't mean that someone having a MongoDB developer certificate is going to be having an advantage as compared to you. So ultimately, we do look at CVs, but as a reference basis as compared to your technical solution. So if you're familiar with, for everyone who are interested in our interview processes, the first round will already be a take-home assignment. So the first thing we look at is your code. We might refer to your resume to understand where this part of the code, where the style is coming from, but we're definitely not going to say, oh, this person doesn't even come from computer science. I'm not going to move him to the second round. That's never happened. So I would say probably worry less about certifications and always don't have stringent rules on that. But do be interested in software development.
Okay, I think there's a question now. It's not really related to roles, but it's more of a Credit Suisse technology overall. Compared to 3 years ago, what is the present digitalization or automation processes in percentage terms at Credit Suisse, i.e. how far has Credit Suisse digitized?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, if you're talking about in terms of technology, I mean, 3 years ago we didn't have OpenShift, for example. In terms of percentage, it's very difficult to say. Different teams are moving at different paces. You know, maybe my team's slightly further ahead in terms of adoption of cloud and things like that, but you know, the sort of overall direction of progress is firstly towards cloud, secondly towards push and event-driven systems, thirdly on the technical front, it's about automation, right? And I've sort of made this point already. I mean, my team's been automating for many years, but there are other teams that are sort of playing catch up. So automation is a big push, and also in terms of the technology hiring strategy and workforce, and making sure that we hire people who are, you know, sort of engineering focused. And so rather than look at, say, you know, what's the percentage of digitization, you need to look at all of those kinds of things, make sure they're all moving in the right direction, and they are at Credit Suisse. A lot of progress has been made over the last 5 or 6 years, where there was a sort of strategy change, particularly here in APAC, where you know, historically banks have had a lot of people who sort of doing project management type roles, sort of, you know, BA roles, and so Credit Suisse was no different. You know, six years ago, there were large numbers of people who were sort of non-engineering, and now, I mean, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, we've had a big push to remove a lot of those sort of admin type roles and replace them with, you know, really good quality engineers, people who can code, people who know how to write tests. And so that's the other sort of metric. In many ways, that's a more important metric, because if you you bring in the right kind of people. I mean, everything ultimately, the success starts and ends with the people that you hire. You bring in the right kind of people, and then the sort of the culture and the sort of technical direction is driven by those people. So that's a big sort of success story that I'd point to at CS. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I was trying to figure out, is there a smart way of saying I don't have the percentage, I don't know how to do the calculation, but I really cannot. There's no smart way of saying it. I don't know the percentage. Probably my department management will have a better way of saying this, but I'll probably just describe how I feel from being a full stack developer and how I experienced for the past 4 or 5 years. So when I joined PB in 2017, the team I was working in, I am the only front-end developer, but we have 3 or 4 QAs. So a lot of things are very manual. We do try to write cucumber test, but very limited, and unit tests don't even mention about those. Probably 1 or 2 unit tests which don't even have assertions. That's where I started with. But now I look at it, my team don't have any dedicated QA, so everyone, all the developers will be writing their own tests, JUnit, Jest, Enzyme, React testing libraries, all the frameworks that is popular in the market. And in terms of deployment process, obviously the same stuff. I remember the old days when every deployment would take about 1 or 2 weeks for the processes to get started. So basically validations, approvals, writing all documentations, and then scheduling things. It just takes super long. And those was one of the tasks that everyone is not interested in taking. We have a role of saying, oh, this time is going to be whoever's chance of taking care of deployment. Everyone's trying to run away from that. That's how bad it was. But now deployment is way easier in our space. I have to say, yes, Mark's space is probably still ahead from ours, so we do have someone to catch up with. But in terms of comparing with ourselves in 4 years before, now the deployment cycle is pretty straightforward. My team actually do SIT or dev deployment, could be on a daily basis depending on when we need it. Production deployment happens at least monthly for my team perspective. There are teams who are doing like 2 weeks releases or 2-month releases depending on their capability. But in terms of the process, it's definitely way more easier and facilitated. The documentation approvals, most of the stuff are automated, probably take 1 or 2 hours, which is compared to the 1 or 2 weeks before, I would say it's a huge improvement. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks, MJ and Mark. I'm very conscious that we are way over time. I guess one last question, which I'm going to package into one. There's one question, does business sign off features? I think that's an important question to be answered. Another question is actually more of front-end specific roles. So this person is asking if there are any front-end specific roles for entry level rather than full stack, and what would the titles be called, and what are the skills you guys will prioritize in candidates. Maybe if I could just give you a little bit of information on entry level. We do have our graduate program again, and it's software engineering graduate program, which I'm actually personally managing. It's quite a wide range software engineering roles, right, including front end, full stack, back end, and we kind of cater to those range, basically depending on what you aspire to do. But yeah, look at on our careers page that will fall under students, so it's not going to be under the experience role. So unless you already have an experience, then it will be on the experience side. Yeah, so I'll leave Mark and MJ to answer about whether business needs to sign off on the features that your teams deliver.
Short answer is yes. So we have sort of control sort of points that make sure that the requirements that were initially sort of gathered are the things that get released into production, and it sort of runs through sort of requirements gathering, sort of story definition through to all of the code artifacts, the sort of chain of custody, and making sure that the code that gets written, checked in, approved, reviewed, tested in every environment, packaged into containers, and so on, right? All of these things can't be changed and tampered. And then as part of that control process, there's a business will sign off, business will review and sign off. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, same for my department. Business sign off is required. If it is a pure technical releases, we still have to describe the change to the business user, saying that to our stakeholders, this is a change, it's a pure technical change, but we have tested. We have to provide evidence of test things are still working, things are still passing. And in cases when there's a business requirement changes, we do have dedicated environment, which is UAT for user to do the acceptance test. Normally we do leave 1 or 2 days for the real users to go into the environment, do the things that they were asking for, and everything has to be, all the sign-offs and all has been provided as part of the RFC request for change.
Great, thank you. So I think Florence, I'll pass the time over back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Esti, Mark, and Minja for your sharing. I think all your answers would have helped the audience understand Credit Suisse a little bit more and how your technology department is working to support this business. So we'll now break for lunch to give the audience some time to explore our exciting hiring and skill zone and visit all the virtual booths of the employers. Our next session will start at 2:30 p.m. when we will hear from UOB on their new fintech outfit, UOB Tomorrow. So please click on the link on our webinar section to join us later. Meanwhile, enjoy your lunch.